Hello, welcome to Any Given Thursday's as yet unnamed Serie A spinoff podcast. I'm your host, David. There's no Maxwell with me on this show, so I'm flying solo. We're going to dive right into talking about Calcio, the transfers, the rumors, the tactics, the games, the teams. It's going to be a lot of fun. This week, after match week 2, the league's starting to shape up a little more. You can tell who had a bad week 1 if it was a fluke now, right? Have they bounced back? Are teams still struggling? Some of the big teams seem to have figured it out. Others that you expected to be up there still looking pretty bad. And I think this week we're going to start with one of those teams, the team I'm wearing, unfortunately, AC Milan. They went to Parma this week and they looked really, really bad, to put it bluntly. It's not been a good start to the season for Milan. 1 point through 2 games, and this 2-1 loss to Parma on CBS in the United States made things even worse. The team looked really disconnected. Fonseca's ideas have not taken hold, and they're still making a lot of the same errors that we've seen over the last 2 years. So let's dive into this game. Talk first about the team that I've already started talking about, Milan. So many issues throughout the team that it's really hard to pick where to start in this game, but I'll start by just talking about the pressing tactics, because I think a lot of their issues stem from Fonseca's commitment to the press and his setup in attack and how it responds to losing the ball and to the counter that Parma had, which Parma's looked like they're a really good counterattacking team. So a lot of those weaknesses were exploited in this game and made even more obvious than they would be against a lot of other teams. Fonseca's really committed to this kind of 4-2-3-1 formation that has the fullbacks push high up the pitch. And then when you lose the ball, very aggressive counter pressing. He really seems to want that. Really aggressive to win the ball back and restart possession. However, the team doesn't seem to understand the counterattack system yet. Or not the counter press system yet. Some players are pressing, some players aren't. There's no communication as to who's going to step up and make the press on the ball. So there were times where 2 players are pressing on the ball. There are times where nobody's pressing on the ball. There's times where you're pressing the outlet pass, but no one presses the ball, so he just keeps dribbling forward. It's a total mess. Yunus Musa, even after the game, came out and said that he and the team were unsure when they're supposed to press and when they're not supposed to press. And it's something that takes time, right, to learn the new system. But Pioli had similar issues with this team when he would ask them to press, and now Fonseca is learning those issues. The attacking players on this team are just not set up to press. They're not guys that you can ask to do that. Rafael Leao is never going to be a good presser. He doesn't have the commitment to doing it. He doesn't want to do it. And I don't know what Fonseca is going to be able to do to get him to start pressing. And when you have attackers that won't press, having a midfield that then presses, it compounds these errors because now the midfield is out of position because they were going to press the player that should be receiving the ball, but no one pressed the player with the ball, who now it's time to pick the longer pass and go to that second level, which was really compounded with Parma looking for those long balls, particularly over the fullbacks, which kind of brings me to my next point in Fonseca's setup and what went wrong for Milan, both this week and last week, as well. It's that he pushes the fullbacks, both of them high up the pitch, which I don't think makes sense when you have no balance then, because your defense is just 2 guys standing back there. And both fullbacks go up the pitch. Parma were looking for these long balls behind both the fullbacks. They were finding them, and they were exploiting the space left by that. And now you only have 2 defenders, and Parma's able to get these 2-on-2s, 3-on-2s, even because both the fullbacks have been pushed up and are not able to get back in time because Theo Hernandez his effort was not good in that game. He did not seem to want to press, to track back. He was slow when he did. He didn't want to run back on defense, and that is going to create a lot of issues. You can see both goals Teo Hernandez, that Parma scored, Teo Hernandez is just slow tracking back. He's caught upfield high and doesn't put in a sprint to get back into the right spot. That said, Teo Hernandez was not the worst performing fullback on the field, or worst starting fullback on the field. That would be Calabria, who had another really, really rough game at right back. His lack of pace is just so highlighted in this Fonseca system. You can tell that he just doesn't have the speed to be able to get back on defense, and it really leaves Milan open on the counter. The first goal, he's caught a little too high up the field, and he just can't get back in time. It's very similar to what we saw in the first game, where he would counteract that pace by just backing off players so much because he knew he couldn't be aggressive to go get the ball, because if he was beaten, they would get past him, get to the byline. And that game allowed space for the attackers to get a cross off. Here, he's just too high up the pitch because he's trying to play into this Fonseca system, and he doesn't have tools to do it. So it doesn't allow him to hide the weaknesses that he clearly has. And obviously, I know a lot of Milan fans are very much anti-Calabria right now. I agree. He's not a player of the caliber that you need if you're going to be playing to win the Serie A, win the Champions League even. Obviously, it's like a future goal for this team. But yeah, if he's not going to be able to have the pace of recovery, you're setting him up for failure. A player that's already been struggling, it's going to make his issues so much worse. And it's not going to allow him to get the confidence that he needs to stabilize his play. But you add into that the fact that Fikayo Tomori is a very aggressive defender, right? Fikayo wants to step up. He wants to engage with the ball. When Calabria lacks the pace to adequately cover for that puts Tomori into bad positions. Because when he misses that tackle, suddenly there's nobody on the right to stop the ball because Calabria doesn't have the pace to get back and cover and was high up the field. So it leads it's a compounding errors that I see with this Milan team that to me start tactically. It starts with Fonseca setting the team up in a way that's not going to lead to success. It highlights a lot of these players' inherent weaknesses and doesn't allow them to express their strengths because they're having to make up for their weaknesses. So when you're also, Calabria's just not very good offensively. He's not a good crosser of the ball. He's not a particularly dangerous passer. He's not incisive. So asking him to be up the field doesn't really add much to the team. And I think we saw that when they switched after the first water break that they took because it was super hot in Parma. After they took that first break, Milan started using a back three when in possession. So Calabria would tuck back in with Pavlovic and Tomori, and he had the ability then to step forward more into the midfield when he saw the opportunity, when it was made sense within the attacking play. And I think that is a way that you can use Calabria, right? When you had that back three, he looked much more confident. He looked much more capable. Wasn't great because he's just not a great player, but he was very serviceable at the level that Milan need to beat a team like Parma. But when you ask him to push forward and then track all the way back, he can't do that. It's not in his game. It's never been in his game, and it never will be in his game. So I think tactically, Fonseca has set up in a way that highlights a lot of these players' weaknesses, and Calabria is the best example of that. That being said, he was not the worst right back Milan played today. Emerson Royale came on for his debut, and I think he probably made a lot of Calabria haters into Calabria lovers because that was one of the worst debuts I have seen from a player in a long time. Seemed like every pass he made was inaccurate and reckless. Not only was it a bad pass, it was a bad idea to make the passes that he was making. He's super far up the field when Leao makes the bad pass to him that sets up Parma's second goal. So again, the same issue. He's out of position to be able to track back. You've left your two center backs because Teo was also pushed forward. So that's what Fonseca wants to do. You've left your two center backs both in a position where they're the only defenders, and now it's a 3-on-2 for Parma. They tear through Milan. Easy tap-in goal for the winner. So that probably saved Calabria in a few people's eyes because they saw what actual really, really bad performance is. And that was Emerson Royale's performance. That was a terrible debut. Hopefully, it's just the debut, and maybe he can play into it, get a little confidence in the system. But I would not expect it. Obviously, my co-host on the Any Given Thursday podcast, where we talk about the Europa League and the Conference League, Max, he's a Tottenham fan. He warned me about this. He had me prepared for Emerson to not be the quality that I think a lot of Milan fans were hoping he would be to replace Calabria. It seems like, at best, a sideways move for this club. But with a player that's not homegrown, and now if you want to make a move, you have to either sell a homegrown player and lose out on another homegrown spot, or sell a player that you just bought for a loss. And that seems like the only way they can improve the right back position. But that's not the only issue. Obviously, Milan just had a lot of issues in this game that were really highlighted. I feel bad starting so negative with everything, but it's what Milan are making us do because they were bad. So the other issue I saw with this team was in the midfield. And it's Fonseca uses that 4-2-3-1. So he has a double pivot, and then a 10. And Milan just don't have guys that are really set up to be the double pivot. They played Reinders, Musa, and Fofana throughout the game in those two spots with Ruben Loftus-Cheek at the 10. And I thought individually, Reinders, Musa, and Fofana looked good. I think all three of them played an individual good game. But their positioning throughout the game and their deployment as a double pivot did not make sense to me because it just let so much space for Parma on the counter. And obviously Parma exploited that. We'll talk about their positives in a little bit. Just going to focus on Milan for now, though. The space behind them, right? They've been used to playing in a midfield three, and even when Ruben Loftus-Cheek has been in that role in the midfield three, it was still a very different setup. So they were leaving a lot of space behind them that allowed Parma to exploit, and it's something that doesn't look sustainable for this Milan team if they're going to keep playing a player like Ruben Loftus-Cheek at the 10. And that's just because Loftus-Cheek, although he last year showed up with goals at great times and can really get himself into dangerous position, when he's not scoring, he's not particularly dangerous on the ball. His dribbling and passing aren't the best. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not the best. And he doesn't contribute much defensive coverage. So now you have two midfielders providing coverage for essentially just two defenders, since your fullbacks are all the way up the field. And none of our midfielders are particularly great defenders. I think Reinders and Fofana looked like he can do a job. Musa can do a job. They all can do a job. But none of them are the guys that you want to trust in front of your back line. I really think Milan need that guy to play this system. Or maybe move to a three-man midfield that takes Loftus-Cheek out of the starting role, bring in a player like Benacer, if he stays, to just provide more stability. Obviously, I'm not the coach. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but maybe they're experimenting with that. Maybe they're experimenting with someone else playing the 10. Maybe Fofana just wasn't ready to play the role that he's going to play in the future, right? It's a new signing, relatively new to the team. Maybe he needs another extra day or extra week, I guess, to adapt and play the role that Fonseca is going to have him play. We'll see. But right now, there's concern there. Just to end on a positive for Milan, though, Pavlovic had a great debut. He had 16 defensive actions, 9 recoveries. He was left one-on-one as the last man a lot. And even when he was beaten, he did a great job of recovering and getting back into a position to bail out the team. I think right before half was a great example of that. It's like the 46th minute. Parma get yet another counterattack, and they go past Pavlovic because he kind of misplays the ball. But he has a great recovery. He's able to make the last-ditch tackle to bail the team out. So that type of recovery and one-on-one defending that he showed throughout the game, I think is a really positive sign for Milan. I think it's a great signing. At least it's looking like it's going to be one. But individual defenders can only do so much when the system is failing them, and that's what we saw today. That I thought it's hard to point to more than a couple players on Milan who were bad today. It was the system and the team unity and cohesion that was bad. So whether that's all Fonseca or the players are just not connecting with one another yet, we'll see. He doesn't have probably a lot of time to figure this out. But on the other end, Parma looked great. I don't want to take away from what Parma were doing. They were really, really good today. Their counters were super quick, super decisive. It was like they were on like 1.5 times speed, just so direct, so engaging to watch, so fast paced. Really, really exciting from them. Dennis Mann is a player I've been talking about a lot to my friends and over the last year. He looked great. He's looked great since dropping into Serie A. I think that's because this was just a Serie A team that was playing in Serie B last year. This is just a good team. They're going to be a mid-table team. They're going to finish somewhere around 9th to 12th. I fully believe that this is a good team, and they're young. That's the best part about it. They have a bunch of young players, and it's not just Dennis Mann that looked good. There are other guys like Boni up top, looked really exciting. He looked like he could become a great player. Bernabe, who won the Olympics this summer with Spain, he looked great in the midfield. Zion Suzuki, the goalkeeper, looked really good. So there's just a lot to be excited about. If you're a Parma fan, the system seems well set up for the players in this team to have this direct and quick counterattack. Just really exciting for them. Let's move on to our next game that we're going to talk about. Empoli with the upset win in Rome against Roma. And Empoli they won 2-1, could have been 4-1, 5-1. They were great. They were really, really good. Just exciting to watch. Again, like that's important for these mid-table teams. If you pull the upset and are engaging to the fans, people keep tuning in. And that's great. Fazzini looked really good. Esposito, Colombo, they're producing these young players. They're growing players. And overall, I thought really good performance from Empoli. Once again, though, we have a big team that has some problems. Roma looked disjointed at times as well. Their midfield was really outclassed today. And I think part of that was that it highlighted some of the issues that Paulo Dybala can present. I mean, there were talks about him leaving to go to Saudi Arabia. Throughout the whole last week, he apparently rejected them after originally thinking about agreeing to a $75 million over 3 million euros over 3 years deal. That's a crazy amount of money. But he rejected it. He wants to stay in Roma. It sounds like his wife was a big impact on that she didn't want to go to Saudi Arabia, loved being in Rome. And it makes sense. It's a good team. They're exciting. They look like they're trying to build something. But I do think there may have been some people in the background of Roma that weren't particularly happy he chose to stay. He essentially at this point needs to be in the 10, right? I don't think you really want to play a 4-3-3 with Dybala as your left winger. I think you want him through the center. And you're not going to not play him because he's such a unique talent. He is one of the best players in Serie A over the last decade. He's been so incredible and influential in the league, and it would have been sad to see him go. And he still, as we saw in this game, he provides those moments. He provides potential winning moments. He almost scored an equalizer to save the game for Roma. But he also highlights the one big issue for Roma is that they don't have any pace. And he doesn't have any pace. and he forces them to be very narrow because their fullbacks don't have the pace to play in a 4-2-3-1. Or sorry, in a 4-3-2-1, right? You need the fullbacks to provide the width. They don't have the pace to hit you with it. And the midfield doesn't have the pace to provide danger coming out of that midfield. Pellegrini is a very dangerous player, but he's not fast. And Dybala is not fast. And so the defense can just kind of sit back and wait for these players to attack, wait for these players to make the first move. They don't have to be proactive. They can be reactive because of the lack of pace. And then you throw in Sule up top, who is a young player. He's really exciting. I think it's good that Roma are playing him, but he's a traditional winger. You want him out on the right. Now the team's unbalanced, and it leans all the way to the right because Dybala is staying central. Pellegrini's coming in central, and it doesn't have a danger out to the left. It's all focused on the right. So Dybala he makes the team unbalanced, but he's so good as an individual that you can't not play him. And I think De Rossi has his work cut out for him to find a way to make this work. Because Roma they're like Milan in that they just don't have the players to do a 4-2-3-1. You're not trusting Enzo Lefebvre and Baldanzi, I guess, or Enzo Lefebvre and Pellegrini to be the midfield duo. I mean, that's not going to work, right? And Cristante or Paredes would have to play, but they've been awful to start the year, and you probably want to drop them if you can, but you don't have anybody you can put in to play in their role in the current midfield three. But yeah, so Roma, they have some issues that they need to figure out, and really it's figuring out a way to get Paulo Dybala to fit tactically with this squad, because he's such a dynamic individual player. And I think Roma have good pieces. They're just missing the connection piece for all that. I don't know if the answer to that is to bring another player, to switch systems. But De Rossi seems to be someone who is willing to tinker just enough to figure something out. He seems to be pragmatic in that aspect, where he's not going to make full swath changes to the system. He's not going to switch to suddenly a 3-4-3 or something like that. But I think he has enough to tinker around to figure this out. So I hope Roma give this time, because I think the building blocks for a team are there. I think they're just one or two pieces away from making this work. But I do wonder if they can get that done within this year. I think this is a concern, because you already dropped 3 points at home to a team that you should be beating. So that's 3 points that you should have had at the end of the year that you're not going to have. And we're now questioning the tactics of this team and the setup. So it's similar to Milan in that things need to be figured out. They need to be figured out sooner rather than later, or you're going to have a bad season, and that's when heads roll and projects end. Right? And I like what Roma started doing, so I hope they can figure it out to provide a good team that can challenge for the Champions League spots in this league. Finally, a big team that did figure things out, and we get to be positive about, at least in the first half of this conversation, is Napoli, who beat Bologna 3-0. Bologna were just played off the field. I really don't have much to say about them, other than Italiano is very possession-heavy, high-line tactic, and that played perfectly into Conte looking to beat you on the counter. This was going, if Napoli were functioning, this was going to be a blowout. And Napoli were functioning after not functioning the first week. So Napoli are taking the right steps. Kvaratskhelia looked incredible. He's one of the best in the world. His assist for the first Napoli goal is just magnificent. Buongiorno looked great as a signing. And I think everybody thought that was a hit, right? Great defender, perfect for a back three system, perfect for Conte's back three system. It was going to work out, right? I think everybody trusted. This was as sure of a signing as you could get. David Neres came in, and he looked really, really good, really electric, really exciting. I am looking forward to seeing what he and Kvaratskhelia can do in a full game together. As opposite wingers, I think they can be really, really dynamic and make this Napoli team super dangerous. I do want to talk about their transfers, though. So it looks like they're bringing in Lukaku and Scott McTominay, which adds to them already bringing in David Neres, Marin, Spinazzola, and Buongiorno. So it's been a pretty active summer window, but all this seems to be reliant on them selling Victor Osimhen, who's still there. Right? So that's seems to be what they're expecting, is that they're going to get the windfall from selling Victor Osimhen and use that to replenish the squad that really needs it after last summer's total failure of a window and last season, and just an awful last season. And they really need that refresh. And I've seen online a lot of people complaining about the quality of the players they're bringing in. Conveniently, they always leave Neres and Buongiorno out of this, who are two, in my opinion, incredible signings, great players. Pointing to bringing in like Scott McTominay, this shows how Napoli really aren't able to bring in marquee signings, and Serie A is not able to bring in marquee signings. And it's like, this is what Conte does. He brings in guys like Scott McTominay. Everybody's like, really, that guy? I mean, he's fine, right? But Conte, you got to trust him at this point, right? He's done this with almost every team he's coached, where he brings in guys that you're like, really? But he has a very specific profile he's looking for. And I think on the ins, you just got to trust Napoli for now. You got to trust that Conte knows what he wants, that Napoli are helping him get that. The outs are an issue. The outs are definitely an issue for this team. Losing Osimhen is something that they seem to have planned for, but for $65 million feels laughably low when you consider what he was being rumored to go for last year. And it makes sense. They've handled this really, really poorly, giving him a wage that they can't afford. He has not handled himself super professionally off the field. They've openly shopped him. So it makes sense that his value is going down. And I wonder if part of this, them accepting the $65 million offer from Saudi Arabia, is just to show Arsenal, Chelsea, PSG, this is what we need right now. Give us 65 and we'll be fine. I hope they can get more. I would have expected they could get more than that. But the outs for this team this whole summer have kind of demonstrated how bad their management of contracts and signings last year were. Zielinski going on a free, I mean, that's a failure in my mind. You have to get something for him. He should have been sold last summer because you knew he didn't want to play for this team anymore. He wasn't going to resign. Now he's gone on a free to Inter. He's made a title rival that much better. And then 3 other outs they had were 3 of their big signings from last year. Jesper Lindstrom, Jens Kajuste, and Nathan all go out on loan. I think all with an option. I know Lindstrom has an option. I think the other 2 have options as well. But under Conte, I think they just need to let Conte do Conte, and I think it'll work out for this team. This game brought me back to believing in Napoli, and I was fully out on that. But I believe again. Just a little bit, but I believe. Back up north, Torino pulled a bit of an upset over Atalanta, winning 2-1. That game was really interesting in that, like, Atalanta didn't deserve to lose, but Torino also deserved to win, if that makes sense. Atalanta did a good job. They created a lot. They looked like Atalanta. They looked just like the way Atalanta have looked over the last few years. But I was just really, really impressed by Torino. Their midfield is incredible. Ricci and Ilic are just great players. I'm astounded that Torino is able to get these guys and hold on to them. I love their pairing in the midfield. They're dynamic. They're exciting. They get into dangerous positions offensively. They do the dirty work needed defensively. It's just great combo. And you throw in Linetti, who had another good game, said a good start to the year. It's definitely looking up for Torino. Offensively, I don't love having to rely on Che Adams and Duvan Zapata for an entire year. That being said, when Zapata is playing well and when he's fully healthy, he's an incredible striker. and Che Adams seems like a really great fit next to him. They make like contrasting runs in a way that opens up space for each other. They seem to have a really good understanding of how to play off one of each other, put the ball in the right spot for the other player. So I think the combo of them is going to be really dangerous, but I just don't know if I can rely on it for an entire season to make me put Torino into the Conference League conversation for Serie A. But right now it's working, and I'm really excited to see how this team goes. Defensively, they were exploited by Atalanta at times. Coco was caught out on Retegui's first corner. Retegui puts a really nice move on, then a really good header. But I do think Coco should have gotten his head to that ball. I think that should have been cleared by him. And then I think it was Voivoda was, I think, the one that was more responsible for the 2 times Atalanta hit the woodwork. But he's been put in a position where he's supposed to win headers, and I don't think that's his strength. But to the end of the game, there was a penalty for Atalanta, pretty soft call, but Vanya Milinkovic-Savic is a great penalty. He's huge, just a big guy, massive lad. He's going to stop it. Really, really impressed by him. I think he had a good game, made some key stops. He's had a good start to the season. I thought he was good against Milan as well. And that brings us to Juventus against Verona. Juventus, they look good. They look really good, and I don't like that. I do not like that as a Milan fan. They look so good their first 2 games. Thiago Motta seems to have this team set up perfectly for his system. And I know there was a lot of movement over the summer, but everybody's hitting their stride. Everybody's playing well to start the year. And they're probably the only team in the league that can say, we had 2 really good first matches. They're probably the only team that can say that. Bremer in this game was incredible. Yildiz and Vlahovic combined for the first goal, which that's going to make Juventus fans excited. They just looked so good. And one of the really exciting things about this, if you're a Juventus fan, is that it's been a couple guys that weren't expected to even play for this team that have provided the difference. When Gula started this game again, he scored in the first one, had a debut goal, and he was really dangerous again today. Didn't get the goal, but he just looked really dangerous. Savona also started. He's another younger player. He did get the goal. And these are 2 guys that had played with the U23 team in Serie A last year. So for them to come in and get the goals and make the difference for this team, they were impactful today. I think that's really, really promising because so many people were concerned about the depth, me included. But they seem to be addressing that. They brought in Pierre Kalulu to help defensively. Hopefully, I think he can start for this team. We'll see. At worst, he's the 3rd option, and now you have a 3rd option behind Gatti and Bremer. But I would like to see Bremer and Kalulu play together. I think they could be a really dynamic duo, really shut teams down. I think they'd make a great combo. The midfield depth, I think, is already there, but if they bring in Coop Miners, it just adds even more to it. Now, Locatelli's looked really good to start the season. When Kefren Thuram's healthy, do you want to bench Locatelli? I don't know, and that's a great problem to have if you're Juventus. They're also bringing in Nico Gonzalez, Francisco Conceição, who will join the attack, and obviously these youngsters have been doing great. So you don't need to bench them, but now you have Fiorentina's best winger. Might as well play him if you can. If he's going to do better, we'll see. But yeah, the depth is really it's coming together for this team. And fun fact about Conceição is he's now the 4th different player on this Juve squad to have had a dad play in Serie A. See, his dad is Sergio Conceição, who was managing Porto until this summer. He played for Lazio, Parma, and Inter. Kefren Thuram's dad is Lilian Thuram. Tim Weah's dad is George Weah. Chiesa's dad is Enrico Chiesa. So a bunch of great players whose kids are now all together on the same team. This is kind of fun. And they just look so good right now. I don't like it. It makes me nervous. They were my pick to win the title this year. So on that end, I'm like, oh, at least I called it. But I don't want to see this. I don't want them to be good. Can we stop? All right, let's move to a game with two teams that weren't that good and aren't expected to be particularly good. They already drew 1-1 with Como on Sardinia. I thought Como looked like the much better team in this one. They were clicking more. They were just looked like a stronger team. They created a lot more chances. They had a chance to win it late, but it fell to Alberto Cherry, who skied it way over the bar. The main reason Como didn't win this, I think, was Pepe Reina, he's not very good. He's not starter quality. Hopefully, Miladero can come into the side. I hope Cesc makes that. I don't know why I screwed up Cesc Fabregas' name. That's embarrassing. I hope Cesc makes that change. Cagliari just not inspiring. They didn't look particularly strong. This is a draw at home to another team that's probably going to be in the relegation race. This is 2 drop points for them, and I think it's a little concerning at this point in the season. But Como also had a couple young players that looked really promising. Perrone looked really good, and Nico Paz looked great. I really, really liked what I saw from Nico Paz in the second half of this game. Really electric winger. Argentine, 19, I think, came from Real Madrid. Keep an eye out on him. He definitely could be the breakout star of this Serie A season. Over on the east side of the country, northeast, Udinese, they pulled the upset of Lazio 2-1, who come crashing back down to earth after a really great week 1. Lorenzo Luca scored, which is nice to see. He's an exciting young Italian striker. Lord knows the Azzurri need one of those. Really powerful header that he sneaks past Casale, and I do not understand how you lose track of a player that tall. He's a giant. How do you not pay attention to where he's going when he's in position to receive a cross? It makes no sense to me. It's part of why I don't really love this Lazio team for the season. I don't see them finishing above 7th. I don't think they're at the level of the other big teams in the league, and Casale and Marusic being in the back line and being starters in this game is part of why I believe that their quality is not quite there to challenge for Europa spots, in my opinion. Thauvin, another really good game for Florian Thauvin. Man, I really butcher his name every time. He was awesome today. He got the goal, Udinese's second. Great run from him, but again, it's one that Lazio just made really, really easy for him. Guendouzi turns the ball over, tries to foul him, wasn't able to stop him, wasn't able to bring him down. And then Patrick and Lazari, the 2 fullbacks, are the 2 players back, and they both seem to kind of like move away from the ball. They just step up. Somebody's got to stop the ball. You need to stop the ball. It's simple things that Lazio don't do that just make me think they're not quite there. They had a chance after Kamara got a second yellow for Udinese, but just really, they got a stoppage time goal. It's like a consolation goal. It wasn't much. Inter looked much better this week than they did against Genoa. They still seem to be kind of like churning into gear, but this was a much more straightforward game. They weren't fully clicking. Lautaro didn't play. That's probably part of it. Taremi did look good, though. He seemed to pair surprisingly well with Marcus Thuram. I wasn't expecting that. I thought they'd clash a little bit, but they seem to be able to play off each other, which is good for Inter, bad for me. But again, they're turning into gear. This was straightforward for them. They look not like their best, but they look good and they got the job done. Monza Genoa was also a game. Monza looked like they could be in some trouble this year, that they won't be able to match what they did last year. There was a lot. They had a lot of possession in this game, 70% possession, and I don't think they had one real chance to score. 9 shots, only a .44 xG. They were very flaccid in possession. Genoa, I thought, looked pretty good for most of the game. I thought they looked good against Inter too, so maybe they're posed for another solid mid-table finish. They have a strong defense. They were really good defensively, stopped Monza from doing much. And while I don't love their attack, I mean, it's not great. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they have a top attack. Gilardino has them creating opportunities just like a variety of ways, which I think is going to make it really hard for teams to keep them off the score sheet for 90 minutes. I think they can attack you through the middle. They can go wide. They can go quick. They can use slow build up. And I think they can create danger in a lot of ways, which will be really good for them throughout the course of the season. Even if I don't think there's necessarily elite players or elite individuals in this attack, I think Gilardino has them set up in a way that will be really successful. So yeah, and I think the backline is just really good. I really like their backline. And so I think the combination of that will be that they'll have another strong mid-table finish. Well, Monza might end up getting dragged further down the table than they were last year, maybe back into relegation battle. But I think there's enough individual talent on this Monza team to overcome that. And I think, if they are struggling, they're going to sack Nesta, who has never shown himself to be a Serie A caliber coach, to be gentle, and then they can bring somebody else in, but start fixing some of the issues. I think they'll have enough to be safe and not in too big of a danger. But they did not look great in this game and haven't looked that great to start the season. And then finally, last game, we have Fiorentina and Venezia. They played to a 0-0 draw. I'm going to focus on Fiorentina because Venezia just didn't show much. They didn't really do much of anything. Jordan had 8 saves, and he's probably man of the match, but that's really the only thing that I saw from Venezia, who haven't done a lot over the summer, kind of stayed pad. Hopefully they can pick it up. I'd like to see something from Venezia. But Fiorentina, they're kind of not off to a great start. We talked about them on our Any Given Thursday podcast in their game in Europe, right? They were playing Puskás Akadémia, who are from Hungary, and played to a 3-3 draw and looked really, really bad for large portions of the game. And I think a lot of it is just like adapting to the new system. It's a big change for this team. They're playing with a new back three. They've made a ton of changes in the midfield, especially brought in new players, almost entirely new midfield. I think Mandragora is the only player who got any real play time that's still there from last year. Obviously, Arthur was technically their player, but that's a different situation. They didn't seem comfortable as a team in Europe, and they didn't feel comfortable as a team in this game. But I do think this was a step forward. I think the midfield is starting to figure itself out. Amir Richardson looked really good. I like what I saw from him, especially in a double pivot. And I think Amrabat is actually a good pairing with him there. I thought they were really interesting together and brought out a lot of good qualities in each other. We'll see what happens with Amrabat, because I know he's been rumored to be on the way out, but there hasn't really been any movement from an individual team that looks like they're interested in bringing him in. So we'll see. But if he stays, I think that midfield pairing could be really good in this system. And the back line against Puskás Akadémia, they kept stepping forward and pushing the high line, which was really dangerous when they didn't have a lot of midfield coverage in that system. In the 3-4-2-1 that Palladino has them playing, they didn't have a lot of midfield coverage against Puskás Akadémia, who were just cutting through them. A lot of that was this back line just stepping up, right? Like they would have under Italiano, who played with such a high line. And I think they're just adapting to a new coach, a new system. But I do think the building blocks are there. Keane looked pretty good. Once Goodmanson comes into this front line, I think that really helps the attack replace Nico Gonzalez. And He was a great player for Fiorentina. It's a shame to see him go to Juventus. But the building blocks are there for this team. I think they need a little bit of time to be dangerous to the big Serie A teams and to be consistent. But they also need to get it done quick because they have a trip to Hungary to play on Thursday, and that's a must-win game. You have to be in the Conference League phase. The total failure if they don't get there. And that's not to discredit Puskás Academia, who I think they played really well against Fiorentina. They are clearly stronger than a lot of people were giving them credit for. The Hungarian league has been relatively solid over the last few years, and Fiorentina have experience playing them. They know it's a difficult place to go in, but so don't want to take anything away from Puskás Academia or pretend that they're a terrible team that Fiorentina should just roll over, right? But this is a must-win. You have to get into the group phase. There's a lot of money for Fiorentina on the line. There's money for the league on the line. If you don't get into the Conference League, you're not going to get top. You're not going to get a top 5 finish or top 2 finish for coefficient. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to get this. They're borderline 3 points once you get into the league phase. There's some bad teams that make the league phase. So Fiorentina needs to get in there. They need to keep winning. Hopefully they do and can make another run in the Conference League and maybe finally win it. But they need to sort this out really, really soon. And, the building blocks are there, but they need that foundation laid. They need to start putting it together. Domestically, I don't know if this team is really going to compete for a Europa League spot like some people were hoping they could. But if they fix everything soon, if they start playing the way Palladino wants them to play, I think they can be there. I think the peak performance of this team is up there almost with the top teams in this league. I think it's almost up there with your Milans and Romas that are going, and Napoli's that'll probably be fighting for 4th or 5th. So we'll see if Palladino can get them moving in that direction, but I think he's got to do it sooner if they want to really make any damage this year. If they want to do something this year, it's got to be soon. But yeah, that's every game. One of our traditions on the Europa League podcast is to do a cheers at the end of the week. And I want my cheers this time to go to Alberto Gilardino, the general manager. I think he's just got this team playing really well. I think he looks to have figured something out with this set of players, and they look really dangerous. So cheers, Alberto. Thanks for tuning in. If you watch this on our first ever YouTube airing for Sever Time with video, like it is what they do on YouTube. I think you give a like and a subscribe. There's something with the notification button. Do that. If you're on Spotify, make sure to check out our Any Given Thursday podcast where we talk about the Europa League and the Conference League. That's always really exciting. Teaches you about some new teams, some really interesting things going on the continent. And a lot of teams that start some of these tactical trends are doing it in the Conference League. So definitely check that out as well. Thanks for listening, and cheers.